The conversation about agritourism in South Africa is something that we must take seriously, all of us. And I think that each and every province should start looking across and seeing what can they promote and showcase, especially now as we are approaching the festive season. Not all South Africans will travel abroad. Others would get an opportunity to actually explore what's happening across other provinces of the country. And I think showcasing what's there in the urban areas, but also in the rural part of the economy is something that is important, because the rural areas depend on a few industries to actually thrive. Yes, we have agriculture, mining, tourism, and a few other aspects, but agritourism, which I think could add much more value within the farming communities, is something that we have to take pride in and promote. But that will not only be a job of the farmers. I think the municipalities have to be at the core of that, because the point that we had always talking about, which is the issue of safety, the issue of roads, as well as the service delivery, is something that needs to be intact for people to be able to take their families and visit various areas across the country. And one of the regions that I've recently visited, and of course I was going there for my own work, the agricultural aspect, looking and talking to a couple of farmers, is Kakamas in the Northern Cape. And I mean, when you're looking at the map in that region of South Africa, it's fairly dry. It's in the Kalahari side, just north of the Karoo region. And in the Karoo, they have their own beauty in that region and what they produce in agriculture, the Karoo lamb, the culture, the clothing industry that you could find, some showcasing, especially when they have the Karoo Wool Festival. But in the northern parts of the Kalahari, which is the Kakamas area, I mean, there's beautiful table grape fields there. And there are a number of lessons that one can take, because when you look at the region on itself, it's dry, but it does have water. And I think the other key ingredient is the fact that the land, there's a freehold, and then the farmers are able to invest, utilize the water, and they've developed a whole big industry on the table grape side. And that table grape industry is the one that I would say, in large part, it sustains the rural economy in that area. But when one visits those farms and they get to see what else is there, the accommodation, the beauty of the landscapes, the food in the region. These are all things that I think as South Africans, we need to be traveling a lot across our country and seeing the unique and the distinct features of region by region and learning a lot about what's in our communities. And this time around in that area of table grapes, it's also a beautiful time of the year, because in about a few weeks' time now, mid-November, going all the way to December, the folks will be busy harvesting grapes. So if you're going there with the kids, they get to see that grapes are not actually only from the retailers. They will see how the harvesting process works and what's going on there in the fields. And I think that educational aspect, but also for us adults to actually get to walk in those fields and enjoy the fruit as it comes out and talk to the farmers, the local communities, I think that's something that enriches us as South Africans and society to actually see what's happening out there in our communities. But I think for small businesses that are also in those areas, either they are in accommodation, or in the food industry, or whatever they sell in those towns, the more there is traffic. And I think that that's something that we all want. But the municipalities must beautify their towns, making sure that the roads are maintained, but also you paint the gardening, and all of those things are done properly so that people could feel that when they're driving across a particular town, they don't need to only fill up their car and then run away, but they can take a walk and explore what else is out there. So this is a collaborative effort that I think we must leverage on, because yes, it's important that we get tourists coming from outside into South Africa. But the majority of those people, let's face it, they go up to the Kruger, others go to Cape Town, Eastern Cape. The coastal regions are the ones that benefit a lot from that tourism. But in the central regions of South Africa, especially if you think of Northwest, the Northern Cape, the Free State, those are some of the areas where we have to think to say culturally, what do we have in each region? on food and agriculture combined and then promote all of that. And I think that's the aspect that we ought to be focusing on a lot as South Africans. And of course, all of this is happening now. We can get revenue from that agritourism to enrich these towns. But this is also at a time and in years where the agricultural sector in South Africa is doing well. Because you're not going to travel to these areas and find farmers depressed and dealing with some of the natural disasters that we sometimes deal with in South African agriculture. But this time around, if someone is in crops or fruit, this has been a blessing. I mean, we are now ending a year where it was a La Niña year. We've received above normal rainfall. The farmers are able to get big harvests in terms of fruits, vegetables, grain, and the oilseeds. It doesn't mean that they are all getting rich because the input costs have been rising. But the point is that the mood generally in rural South Africa is upbeat. And that helps when you are talking about all of these extra activities that can keep those economies and those towns going. Because even the next year, 2026, the outlook does look reasonably positive. I mean, when you talk to the very same table grape farmers, either from Kakamas or anywhere across the country, the message that we are getting is that this will be, again, another excellent year. And in fact, at the end of October 2025, South Africa Wine, SA Wine, they came up with a statement where they were saying, look, even in the wine industry, we are expecting that the harvest will be reasonably good, the quality will be reasonably good, which means then if you are in that wine route in South Africa, the mood there will also be upbeat amongst the farmers. If you are in the table grape industry, you see the same. If you are in central South Africa, things are also looking reasonably well there, because also at the end of October 2025, what we heard from the National Crop Estimate Committee is that the summer grain and oilseeds farmers plan to plant about 4.5 million hectares. And you ask me, how big is that compared to last year? It's up by 1%. But the point is that that speaks again to that optimism that is out there. And this is not just the farmers telling us what they intend to plant. I mean, there's evidence that signal to this. In the previous segments of AgriView, we've talked about the solid tractor sales that indicate that confidence that the farmers are having about the upcoming season. But also, if you think about the fuel prices all the way through to the end of October, fuel prices have been coming down quite nicely, which means then that in terms of the input costs, at least things are shaping up reasonably well. Although, of course, the fertilizer and the other input costs are up. But the point is that there are some things that are working out for the positive in the South African agricultural sector. So if you go to rural South Africa when all of these things are happening, that does help. But the municipalities, they need to lead the way, because we can't just say farmers develop accommodation, do all of these things, and people will come while the municipalities are not maintaining roads. They're not dealing with the issue of rural safety, and you're telling people to be traveling around with their families without us ensuring that we're properly dealing with this. These are things that we need to do. And I think these will help a great deal in rural communities, because there aren't a lot of industries that are generating income. Yes, I've said there may be mining, there may be tourism in some, there may be agriculture, but I think that if we combine all of these and we make sure that the whole concept of short lefts is something that lives with South Africa, because there's so much to see across our own country. And I think that's something that can actually support the rural economies in South Africa. And in fact, this is perhaps something that the Department of Tourism guys, alongside with the Rural Development Department and Land Reform, they need to be thinking about, because yes, they deal with land reform, but the other part of their responsibility is rural development. And rural development speaks to the infrastructural needs to ensure that the rural economies do develop. And I think this is another avenue of agritourism that we should be exploring as we try to get the rural economies of South Africa to be in fairly good shape. And I think if this is an outlook for 2026, and we are coming from a year that is already excellent, then these are some of the positive developments that we must be building on. And of course, I won't say, the mood and all things are rosy in South African agriculture. There is still one subsector that deals with a lot of challenges. We've talked about the issue of a foot and mouth disease in the livestock industry. And unfortunately, even now, in November, as we are releasing this particular segment, November 2025, this unfortunately still remains one of the major challenges for farmers that are in the livestock industry. And it means then that in their export activity, there's still some pressures in terms of incomes in some of those communities. There's still some pressures. But all things considered, and thinking about the agricultural economy in general in South Africa, we are broadly on the upside on that. And I think we must be building on all of this activity. So next time when you hear somebody talking about agritourism, you should know that agritourism is something that can be done across all provinces of South Africa. Those that are heavy in the livestock, they can focus on that and some value chain and activities on those areas. The wine industry already does excellent work on that. In the northern regions of South Africa, if you are in citrus, macadamia, there's a lot of things to see and also to be more educational for students and kids and everyone to actually visit those aspects. So this is something that as a sub-theme of the tourism industry in general in South Africa, we should be focusing on. And municipalities, they should ensure, and their provincial leadership, that their provinces do whatever they can to promote this aspect because it enriches the life and the economic activity in the rural areas of South Africa. And with that, folks, let's stop there. We'll come back with another segment. And as always, thank you so very much for watching this segment. And please share the link and spread the message about the work that we try to do on AgriView. Thank you.